May I now request Dr. Shashi Tharoor, the former Minister of State for External Affairs and Yechuri, and also a contributor to the first volume, to give us the benefit of his insights. Sir.
Honourable former Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh, Honourable former Vice President Shri Hamid Ansari, Mr. Chidambaram, Mr. Yechuri, my good friends Professor Ashish Nandi and Professor Rathore, and of course Acharya from Penguin, ladies and gentlemen, friends. It's an extremely important initiative that we're here to celebrate that's been undertaken by the Samruddha Bharat Foundation. What we are trying, I think, in the course of this series of volumes to accomplish is something that many Indians need, which is a sharper ideological definition of the values that have sustained this country since independence 72 years ago, and which were taken for granted by too many of us for too long. In fact, it's impressive that the series editors, who are both scholars of considerable distinction from different fields, have actually planned 14 volumes and are assembling 140 academics, activists, policymakers to express their views on the issues here. We all know what's happening in the country. I won't belabor what every one of you, I'm sure, sees on your television screens, reads in your newspapers, and is anguished about in your own conversations. A fundamental assault on the foundational ideas of our freedom and of our republic is going on. And the need, the moral urgency of creating a positive and constructive alternative paradigm could not possibly be greater. If ordinary Indians have been seduced, cajoled, cudgeled into supporting the ruling party, it becomes indispensable to re-articulate our values and what we believe in, the ideas we have held and the ideas we've retained from the freedom struggle. And of course, to convey them to people, because when they have that feeling of recognition that yes, these people are talking about things that we too believe in, that is when they will once again return to support the forces that support a progressive India and inclusive India. The essays in the book, of course, are offering very different but compatible visions of this. When I was growing up, in India, unity in diversity was the most hallowed of our self-defining cliches. It's time, I think, to give it new content. And the book itself, in many ways, seeks to produce that unity out of diverse voices and diverse perspectives in a way that's very different from what the present government prefers, which is not really unity, but uniformity in the name of unity. I once again want to thank Gurdeep Sapal, the executive trustee here, Pushparaj Deshpande, the managing trustee, and the two volume editors for their tremendous initiative in putting this forward. This is going to be the first volume, the keystone of the arch, and many more will follow. But I certainly hope that all of you present will delve into these essays, read the book, and participate in the project of redefining and re-articulating an idea of India that is truly worth defending. Thank you very much, and Jai Hind.
Thank you, sir, for your insightful remarks. Your words have and continue to inspire many across India. Could I request Sitaram, sir, who has been so encouraging of Samruddha Bharat as a whole, to kindly enlighten us with your remarks. Sir.
The Honourable former Vice President of India, Dr. Hamid Ansari, the Honourable Prime Minister, Shri Manmohan Singh Ji, P. Chidambaram, former Finance Minister, Shashi Tharoor, also a good friend of mine, though junior in college, but nevertheless in the Parliament, Professor Nandi and Professor Rathore, and the members of the Samruddha Bharat Foundation, the trustees, and the distinguished audience that is here. I think this is an extremely timely venture that the Samrit Bharat Foundation has undertaken. And it's not an easy job to bring together 140 thinkers, the best of the minds together, to discuss this issue of the vision for India. And that vision for India, today we are at a defining point. The biblical age span of 70, which is what our republic is today, we are at a defining moment on what will be the future of this republic. And I think the energy that has come out with the youngsters today, the very redeeming factor, that the symbols of nationalism, so to speak, the Indian flag, the preamble of the Constitution, and the singing of the national anthem, these have become the standard slogans that are being raised in this movement that is there in the country today. And I think this will define which way we should move forward. But this, in a sense, is also a reflection or a continuation of the battle between three visions that emerged during our struggle for freedom and defining what India is all about. One, and the mainstream vision during our freedom struggle, was of course led by the then Congress, which recognized, and all three were born in the decade of the 1920s, which recognized that a country of such diversity and such plurality can never remain united unless there's a political structure that is founded on secular democracy. The other, to which I belong to, that stream, though I was born much later after the Constitution was adopted, was the one that said, yes, absolutely correct, but it has to move forward. That the political independence we gain must be converted into the economic independence of our people and for social justice. And that will mean a continuing march towards socialist objectives. The third was an antagonistic vision that had a twin expression, which defined India, or sought to define India, on the basis of the religious affiliation of its people. And the twin that was born was that of the concept of an Islamic state and the Hindu Rashtra. And this battle between these three visions has been continuing for this century. And today we have reached a defining point of how the future of India will be shaped on the basis of which vision. And that is why I think this is a very, very important initiative and an effort that is being made. And these volumes should contribute to this churning that is taking place today in the country. Because what is required is actually a new paradigm through which these values are now communicated to our youngsters. And this paradigm and the synergy that we see now, which has to be further strengthened, that synergy will have to build around this new manner in which we can communicate. And that is very important. And for that, I think these volumes will play a very important role in contributing to this churning that is currently taking place. There will be many battles, of course, but eventually the battle is that of what this idea of India is all about. It is an inclusive concept. What we have today is the battle with the exclusivist concept. Plurality of this sort in India can only be strengthened by strengthening the bonds of commonality that run through our diversity. Any effort to try and impose a uniformity over this diversity will lead to the implosion of this country. And that is the defining movement where we are today. And that is why I think I would like to congratulate the entire trustees of the Samrit Bharat, Gurdeep Sappal, and our young friend who's taken this entire initiative in getting all this organized, the editors, of course, and of course the publisher, Mr. Penguin, for having published this volume and the subsequent ones, and requesting or appealing to all of you that whether you like it or not, we are part of this current churning. We have to take a position. Only appealing to you to take a position, and hope this series and these contributions will help in the process of at least shaping, if not crystallizing, a point of view on what the idea of India should be, and we need to preserve it today. We owe it to the posterity, we owe it to our country, and I'm sure you'll all join this current battles that are going on. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for your words of wisdom. We are extremely fortunate to have worked with you for this volume and hope to solicit your continued support in the future. Given the socio-economic turmoil India has witnessed in the last few years, I'm sure everyone here and the country at large is eagerly anticipating the remarks of the former Finance and Home Minister. It is therefore my privilege to request Chidambaram sir to deliver the keynote address. Sir.
Respected Shri Hamid Ansari Shah, respected Dr. Manmohan Singh Ji, Shashi Tharoor, Sitaram Yechuri, other panelists, trustees of the Shamruddha Bharat Foundation, distinguished guests, friends. I find that I was given an advance copy of a book. I wanted to follow in the footsteps of Shashi and speak gently, but having received an advance copy of the book, I'm afraid I have to either confess that I have not read the book, or I've read the book and I will make certain comments on the book. This is not your ordinary book. You cannot read it when you have nothing else to do. You have to read it when you can devote the time to read it. When you can keep aside all thoughts, all distractions, and pay attention to some of the most fundamental issues raised in the book. Firstly, this volume is one of 14 volumes. It's an ambitious project. It perhaps will take many months or many years, and I'm proud that we will have 150 authors of great distinction contributing to the central idea of rethinking India. The senior editors say, in order to further disseminate these ideas, both to kickstart a national dialogue and to further build a consensus on them, we are bringing out this set of 14 volumes highlighting innovative ideas that seek to deepen and further the promise of India. In a sense, we must be unhappy why we have to rethink India after 70 years of the Constitution. I can understand reimagining India, but if we are pushed to rethinking India, it means that someone has struck or is pretty close to striking at the roots of our foundation of this country. I sincerely hope I'm wrong, but if people are ready to strike at the very root, at the very foundation of what we have constructed as the Indian Republic 70 years ago, and have tried to nurture it in the last 70 years, perhaps the publishers, the editors, and the authors felt that the situation was so grave, it is no longer enough to reimagine India, it's no longer enough to remake India, it's no longer enough to rebuild India, it's no longer enough to renew our promise which we made to ourselves 70 years ago, but the time has come to rethink India. Now, what is this new thinking? Some of these essays question ideas that you and I have accepted for long. For example, those of you who have read *Sapiens* know that the sapien who's the human being today is no more than about 7,000 or 8,000 years ago. The author of one essay says, geological research places the formation of the Himalayas 50 million years ago. Genomic research has accepted that the spread of the original population in India was from the peninsula south, where Sitaram and I come from and Shashi comes from, to the west and north. Plant genetics has determined that agricultural practices began spreading from Iran to what is now India some 9,000 years before our time. Archaeology takes us back 5,000 years to trace the roots of our civilization. Linguistic and literary history have succeeded in tracking our path back to a period spanning only 4,000 years. History, based as verifiable evidence, has pieced together in India of the last 2,700 years. Shashi adds in his essay something which is obvious but didn't strike me. Christianity arrived on Indian soil with St. Thomas the Apostle, who came to the Kerala coast sometime before 52 Christian era and was welcomed on shore by a flute-playing Jewish girl. He made many converts, so there are Indians today whose ancestors were Christian. Up to that is obvious. The rest is true but not very obvious. Well before any Europeans discovered Christianity. Well before Americans discovered Christianity. So in a sense, India is a Christian nation before Europe became a Christian continent and America became a Christian nation. Thank you for highlighting this point. Now what are we told? They are dragging us back to an age which may or may not have existed. That's why it's called a myth. That's why the stories around it are called mythology. And they're asking us to imagine that we will recreate that age, where our cultural and literary history is only 2,700 years old. It is in this 2,700s that we have developed the ideas that make a modern democracy. It doesn't go back beyond 2,700 years. Maybe more archaeological evidence may take it back another 1,000 years, but surely it will not go back more than 4,000 years. In these 3,000 or 4,000 years, the human race has built many institutions, many structures. The most important, I think, is democracy. And we have built those structures by building them on the foundations of some very seminal and fundamental ideas. One of the most fundamental ideas of a modern democracy is secularism. There are several essays which debate what secularism is, what secularization is. I think each one of you should get a copy of the book and spend time reading and understanding it. These are very complex issues that are being debated very profoundly. That secularism is under challenge. That secularism is under challenge to a point where citizenship has become an object of attack and challenge. We've had debates on secularism in the last 20, 30, 40 years. But we have reached a point where the debate on secularism has shifted to a debate on who is a citizen of India. Somehow these two issues have been conflated. If you are secular today, There are people who will call you anti-national. If you are secular today, they will call you are speaking the language of Pakistan. If you're secular, your patriotism is in question. And many of these people will also have their citizenship questioned in course of time. That is the point of danger at which we have seemed to have arrived in the last few years. Now let's turn to citizenship, and I just want to spend a couple of minutes. There's a very interesting essay on how, while we all think we are full citizens, not all of us are full citizens. Our citizenship has been diminished by a number of things. For example, the author says, there are a certain number of languages in the schedule to the Constitution. And then he comments, when we look at the plight of communities that do not speak any of the scheduled languages as their mother tongues, and we note that the state has been uninterested in creating access to education for them in their own languages, their linguistic citizenship is compromised. Those who fail to understand the intricacies of law courts automatically become legal non-citizens. Those who have bank accounts on Aadhaar cards of some degree of genuine economic citizen status, those who do not lose out a part of economic citizenship. In the digital world, if internet is denied to you for 7 months, you are diminished as a digital citizen. But I think these essays open up our minds to various aspects of citizenship and the various nuances of citizenship and how each one could, in one way or other, be a diminished citizen. But if citizenship is taken away from millions of people, the simple political citizenship is taken away from millions of people, how diminished they will become. I think there are serious concerns, and these concerns have been addressed in these essays, and I urge you to read them. Finally, there's one essay which encapsulates the point of view of those who are propagating the Hindu Rashtra and Hindutva. And it says, who is Hindu, which was reiterated and perversely materialized in Golwalkar's We or Nationhood Defined. It's based on 5 specific categories: language, race, religion, territory, and culture. What the founding fathers of India did, I believe they tried to do, Jawaharlal Nehru and Dr. Ambedkar and others, was to build a concept of citizenship that will be based on the Constitution, a constitutional citizenship, rather than a citizenship that is based on language, race, religion, territory, and culture. The essay goes on to argue that each one of these are incomplete ideas. I won't dwell on them. But what is happening today is there's a reassertion that it's only when you speak a particular language or you speak one of the languages belonging to that family, or you belong to a race, or you belong to a religion, or you practice a particular culture, you will be an Indian citizen. If this definition is applied, many of us will cease to be Indian citizens. Many of us will become diminished citizens. And a large number may even become non-citizens. So I think we have to understand, as long as this was simply a theoretical idea propagated by Savarkar and Golwalkar, we could debate it and leave the debate with a smile on our face. But when this has become a political project today, and these ideas are embodied in a political project, and the state is willing to put its power and resources and authority and might behind taking this political project forward, I think we should seriously worry what will happen to the concept of a constitutional citizenship devised by Dr. Ambedkar, Jawaharlal Nehru, and others. Finally, there's one essay which says why secularism is important. Secularism is an attempt to control politicized religion from taking over the state. Today, a politicized religion has almost taken over the state. It has almost taken over all the institutions. Many institutions have been captured by those who subscribe to this politicized religion. If you don't belong to that religion, even if you belong to that religion, but if you don't subscribe to the politicization of that religion, you have no place in many institutions of India today. Finally, an essay argues for constitutional morality. I urge you to read that. The one sentence that I want to leave you with is the contrast between what Gandhiji said and did and what Hitler did. Both were more or less contemporaries. Hitler was about 15 or 20 years younger, but the period overlapped. It says, it was a time when Gandhi came up with his idea of civil disobedience as a statement of one's moral courage in the face of injustice. Civil disobedience as a statement of one's moral courage in the face of injustice. And I'm very proud that people who we thought will not come out of their homes, will not come out of the streets, will not brave the cold and the water cannons and the lathis and even the bullets, are now actually practicing the civil disobedience of Gandhiji. On the contrary, Hitler's view was demanding complete obedience towards the supreme leader. We have examples today in India, in Delhi, of civil disobedience as a statement of one's moral courage against injustice. We have also examples of people demanding complete obedience to the supreme leader. I'll leave that thought with you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your thought-provoking and incisive remarks. I am confident that your words will resonate with millions of Indians who are anxious, desperate even, for a positive and constructive alternate paradigm. Thank you also for sparing time from your hectic schedule to be here today. We will now be launching Samriddha Bharat Foundation and Penguin India's first volume in the Rethinking India series. Could I request the other two series editors of the volume, Professor Mridula Mukherjee and Dr. Saida Hamid, to join us on stage to launch the volume. Ma'am. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now have a brief panel discussion with some of the contributors to the volume and the series editors. In that context, may I request Dr. Saeeda Hamid, Professor Mridula Mukherjee, Professor Ashish Nandi, Professor Akash Singh Rathore, and Navdeep Singh Johar to kindly stay back on the stage for the discussion. Could I request Nagarao to kindly help us clear the chairs?
So thank you very much for being here tonight. There's one thing I have to do which will embarrass my daughter very much, but she's desperate to meet Dr. Shashi Tharoor, so will you please... She came here for you, not for me. She's Amaya. Oh, with that done, we can get back to our business. Have you not? Oh. Four mics we have. So we're here to discuss this book which has been described in its contours by the speakers before in a manner that I think suggests its importance. And now we turn to a more academic I'm going to call you an academic nowadays because you're a scholar of great insight, though not an academic, but a scholar. So let's say a scholarly panel where we discuss, in some ways, some more details about what this vision is, why the book needed to be written, why we were... I mean, just imagine, you've brought so many people together, they could write anything. And this is what we chose to produce. So what we want to talk about is why the urgency, why is it important? And I think we can begin with a person who's been a leading public intellectual in India for 3 decades now. I believe all of us have read his work. Younger people like me have grown up on it. Professor Nandi, would you please comment in some respects about where you think this volume fits into the contemporary climate and maybe its importance for the future?
Well, perhaps I should start by saying that it was not always that visions were in the future, located in the future. For instance, both Indian civilization, let us call it Indic civilization, to distinguish it from the Indian nation, and the Indic civilization, given its wider spread, as well as Chinese civilization, has a long tradition of locating visions in the past. Ramarajya was a kind of a vision of the future located in the past. You are always trying to retrieve that. Actually, Christian Europe also had, the Christendom also had such a vision, the Garden of Eden, that kind of dissolved at the end of the Middle Ages. Now we have a situation, particularly in the southern hemisphere, where all available options that we had in futures, all the visions, have been subjugated. In some sense, our futures have been stolen. Because now we have only one future, globally. And that is what is being projected. And we have sometimes, can say that, we have internalized it rather fully. At one time, 1 billion, at that time it wasn't 1 billion people, the virtuous Indians and the virtuous Chinese for that matter, or the virtuous Africans, those who had lived a virtuous and spotless life, aspired to go to heaven. Now they aspire to go to New York. It is not that this came in New York too. I mean, we also aspired at one time to go to London after we died, after leading a good life. And in the interim period, we also occasionally aspired to go to Moscow after our death, or Beijing. But now, at the moment, we know what is our future. It has been laid out, and we have only the right to cross the T's and dot the I's as far as our visions are concerned. Now, we hope this book and the other 13 volumes which we expect would come out will project a vision of the future, not only for India, but other societies which do believe that other options exist, that all options have not been exhausted by the future we have been handed. And there are arguments about that. Already many scientists have begun to talk about not leaving any vision for the future because they see it as very dark, particularly because of the rising environmental crisis. In some ways, our futures are also now under threat. And let me point it out, he has talked about scholarly discussion. Let me at least present the point of view of my discipline, psychology. To us, the future is not in the future. The future exists now in our mind. We define the future or want the future. We pine for a future which is within us at this point of time. Exactly, the past is not outside there in our archives, and with an objective study we can recover it. Whatever past we recover is our construction on the basis of available data, available insights. It is the past as it exists now. So this moment is the moment where past and the future meet. And one hope I have about this set of books is this, that they will encourage us, unburden us from some of the loads we are carrying, and allow the next generation to think of not one vision, but multiple visions. Even these books, even in this book, I am sure over the time you will discover not one vision, but the signs of or imaginations or markers of multiple visions contesting from. recognition. And that's the way this civilization has always lived. Our diversity is not something imposed on us. Our diversity is a diversity of choice. We do believe in this civilization. This is the civilization I know. Do believe that diversity is natural and absence of diversity is a marker of death. Because this civilization has survived over the centuries with different visions and different constructions of the past contesting. And that context, that dynamics has allowed us to maintain a certain balance which many other civilizations have not been able to manage. Most civilizations have disjunctive pasts and disjunctive presence. Our civilization, that is a continuity. I say this because not to avoid, only to avoid a monolithic concept of a vision. I like to believe that with this idea of a vision, that vision, singular, is actually the vision you can yourself nurture and project and protect after reading these books out of the multiple visions which are in setting up the dynamic of this civilization. And I do believe this we owe to the posterity.
Thank you very much. Before I come to the two others who are series editors, will have probably something to say about the series as well, and say that he contributed to the volume in a very significant way. I'll come to Navtej Singh Johar, who has a unique distinction because he's the only person in the book who's both written about and has also written. Kalpana Kanabiran has written a very interesting article about the case, Navtej Singh Johar versus the Union of India. Navtej, you wrote about embodiment, which is an aspect that others of us more cerebral tend to neglect, and the volume tended to neglect. Can you talk in some way about why you thought in Vision for a Nation, why you thought speaking about the body would be essential given the current political climate?
Yeah, thank you. As he says, I'm a practitioner, I'm a dancer and a yoga practitioner, and I'm coming from that perspective. And my preoccupation is the body. And I also realize that there is a body, and then there is the idea of the body. And similarly, like there's an idea of India, there's an idea of a nation. And somehow the idea never quite allows the body to be. The idea never quite allows the body to exceed the idea. And the body is far more than the idea, or far more than what the idea can even imagine, so to speak, or articulate, because as we know, something called paravak, something that's beyond vak, something that can't be even spoken about, it is there, but words can't capture it, ideas can't capture it, and yet it's a human experience. Thus I dance. I mean, I can't say things with words, but I have to kind of resort to non-verbal expression because there's an excess between the word and yet something left to be said, for which I have to move my hands like this because that expresses or emphasizes what I'm trying to say, what my words can't. So this thing, when I say the idea of, and to say that the idea of the body is, and the idea of the nation that we are troubled with today is not new. I would say that dance has been, has lived this idea from the very beginning. And people think that dance is kind of peripheral and dance is like, something cosmetic. Indian dance I'm talking about. Being a dancer and from the inside I can say that I think that India could not even have dreamt of being a modern nation till such time that it had not moralized the Devadasi. The Devadasi, who was a temple, who was like a temple priestess / pleasure woman, modernity could not digest that paradox, and the paradox had to be split or categorized, so to speak. So, and it's at that time that the whole idea of a pure, moral, chaste past of India was envisioned, and the whole idea of the Devadasi was obliterated to say, oh, she was like a Catholic nun, she was supposed to be a virgin. Ye to galti se pata nahi kya ho gaya. And that's exactly what's happening today, and that's been happening all over. We've always resorted to some kind of a fake, fabricated past where everything was all right, like Sone ki chidiya kind of a thing, you know. And I'm losing my point now. So this thing of imagining the past is not new. We have all participated in that. And imagining a fabricated past, not a real past, an idea of what India should have been. So we are all kind of, living in that. We want to go back to that once upon a time. That's what's happening today. They want us to take us back to that once upon a time. Jab sab kuch theek tha, jab sab kuch pure tha, this obsession of purity. For many years, I've had a very troubled relationship with dance, which I love and hate. And I hate dance because I feel it reeks of cultural chauvinism. And the chauvinism is that of being spiritual and pure and refined, and all these ideas that have been imposed upon the idea of India. And for 30 years I've been saying that there is not much of a difference between cultural chauvinism, which many of us have participated in, and fundamentalism. There's a very thin line between that. So this trickle of chauvinism that we have all participated in has now come to be, and it's taken its gloves off, so to speak. And I think that culture has been quite often the soft fundamentalism, at least in this country, or what is considered classical. So that's what brings me back to the body, that there's the idea of the body, and the idea of the body has been very dangerous, because it's always like, I just heard moral authority. Now what is moral authority? It's an idea. The body, so moral authority is either you're correct, you're politically correct, or you are virtuous, or you are righteous, or you are chaste, and you're standing on some kind of a moral, sense of right and wrong. And that is imposed upon the body. But really, if you start working with the body, like a serious yoga practitioner or a somatic practitioner, you realize that the body is, the sensitivity of the body, the beauty of the body, far exceeds anything that's right and wrong. The body is supremely moral on its own, without any morality imposed upon it. But yet we can't allow that. I might be going in circles, but I'm trying to say that an idea, as opposed to something that is dangerous, and we need to be, and even idealisms can be dangerous. And we need to really look at them and also critique and take stock of our own ideas that we've kind of been with for so long.
Thank you, Nitesh. You can read Nitesh's contribution on embodiment, which goes to the history of Indian philosophy in a very intriguing way, because it addresses the history of philosophies in India by the vantage point of lived experience and the body. Another contribution, which in fact moved me and several others to tears, was that by Dr. Saida Hamid, whose essay spoke about not so much the future of India, but the way that a kind of past that had opened up so much possibility for the future has been closed off. And it's been closed off and constrained to such a degree that it almost seems like a fantasy, as opposed to the vision that we all collectively had, at least from the 1950s. Would you care to speak on this.
Yeah, thank you. It's very difficult for me to articulate my feelings here. When Gurdeep opened the meeting today, he talked of we are living in dark times, and I was reminded of these lines, which sometimes I don't know if I can believe in them or not. And this is lines from a poet, which says, रात जितनी भी संगीन होगी, सुबह उतनी ही रंगीन होगी. दो घड़ी का है मेहमा अंधेरा, किसके रोके रुका है सवेरा. I don't know anymore if I believe in it. So, I also live right in Jamia and Shaheen Bagh. So, my reality comes from a lived experience. And Akash was very encouraging. I thought I wrote something very personal, unlike some of my other colleagues who wrote more scholarly pieces. But then I wrote as I felt. And I vision where this Hindu-Muslim, this what was referred to by the opening panel, all the binaries and the dichotomies, Hindu hai, Musalman hai, anti-national, Ghaddar, all those epithets suddenly become a lived reality every day. And what Akash liked about my article, I think, and I can only talk about that, is that I spoke of a time where these distinctions did not exist. Hindu poets wrote about Allah and Rasul and the Prophet, and Muslims wrote about Ram, Diwali, Holi, Krishna, Guru Nanak, and nobody thought anything of it. So for me now, I live with a label which says I'm a Muslim woman. There is something happening among the Muslim women of this country. There is a leher which is going through, but it also means that when you press a button, the current can blow up Shaheen Bagh and all the Shaheen Baghs across the country now. It's a time where one remembers Allama Iqbal, who wrote about, and I've quoted that in my article, who wrote about Ram. And he said, है राम के वजूद पे हिंदुस्तान को नाज, है राम के वजूद पे हिंदुस्तान को नाज, अहले नजर समझते हैं उसको इमाम हिंद. Allama Iqbal called Ram an imam, and Ahle Nazar are people of vision, and this is all about a vision. Or I think of another example of a poet who, for me, again symbolizes the seamlessness between Hindus and Muslims, the link, the connection. His name was Tilok Chand Mehroom, and I'm sure the older generation like me would remember that his son was a man called Jagannath Azad, and I remember Jagannath Azad very well. But Tilok Chand Mehroom's lines, which I just want to read out to you, there are only 4 lines, again would probably be considered to be extremely distasteful. And yet he says, praising God, Allah, he says, चमन में दश्त में वादी में कोहे सहरा में, चमन में दश्त में, वादी में, कोहे सहरा में, कोहर में, ओले में, शबनम में, अब्रो दरिया में, शरर में, शोले में, आतिश में, बरते सीना में, all elements of nature, whether it is kohra, whether it is an ola, whether it is shabnam, whether it is abr, whether it's darya, whether it's sharar, whether it's atish, whatever the elements of nature, he says, चमन में, दश्त में, वादी में, कोहे सहरा में, कोहर में, ओले में, शबनम में, अब्रो दरिया में, शमी में, गुल में, नसी में, Masarrat Afza mein, Naseem means the breeze. Masarrat Afza means what gives pleasure. Shami mein, Gul mein, Naseem mein, Masarrat Afza mein, ये सारे जलवे हैं किसके? खुदा के जलवे हैं. So, Allama Iqbal talks about Ram and Tilok Chand Mehroom talks about Khuda. And that is, to me, that was India. That was the India where Muslims like me, Maulana Azad was one person who spoke about it and who actually defined what it means to be a Muslim and to be an Indian. This was the country I loved, I still love, but I feel now that I am, what am I, a Ghaddar? Am I anti-national? All of those epithets now come to me every single day of my life. And this volume must be read, because for me this volume is that रात जितनी भी संगीन होगी, सुबह उतनी ही रंगीन होगी. गम न कर गर है बादल घनेरा, किसके रोके रुका है सवेरा. This book is about that, Savera. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Professor Mirdulla, we leave the last word to you. As a series editor, you've envisioned the whole project, and if you give the final words for the panel.
Well, I think many people before me have talked about what the conception of the project is. It is to bring together multiple visions on different aspects, on a variety of aspects, which address themselves to all facets of Indian society, politics, culture, the range. The idea is also to address issues of caste, of gender, of ethnicity, not just politics and economics, but of agriculture, of employment. So it's a very broadly conceived project. But what I would like to emphasize here is that the vision that lies behind this search for a new vision is very much the vision of India's freedom struggle. Sitting here in Jawahar Bhavan today, and I want to say that to you, who can you ever think of yourself as a Gaddar with Jawaharlal Nehru's protective aura, which still stays with us? I think that this is the vision which very much is alive, and it comes through in the articles which have so far come out in this book, in some of them more overtly. For example, the one written by Shashi Tharoor, which I think where he conceptualizes the whole idea of the Indian nation very much in the terms in which the freedom struggle saw it. I would like to just, for example, a couple of quotations from Mahatma Gandhi would, exactly describe what I want to convey. One of his most well-known, I don't know nowadays, maybe again well-known because of what we see around us, was that what is the India of my dreams? And he said that a country in which people are made to feel small because of the religion they belong to can never be the India of my dreams. And if we look around us today, we see that as and he put it very beautifully, as he always did, in simple language, feel small. Second-class citizens, non-citizens, fighting for citizenship rights. I mean, all this is much more than just feeling small. But we also know that the whole conception of India, which he tried to put into practice throughout his life and certainly fought for so avidly in the last years of his life, where the famous example when in Delhi, in this city, the kind of language which we are hearing today, the only way to keep your sanity is to keep reminding you that in this same city, in 1948 in fact, 72 years ago, in this very month, Gandhiji had gone on his last fast from the 13th to the 18th of January, where it was essentially a fast where he said that people have to agree to live together. And he put a challenge before the leaders of all the political parties, including RSS and Hindu Mahasabha, that they all have to agree that they will stop the madness that is going on around them. And they all came to him and they gave undertakings that they will not continue with what they were doing. And that was the vision of India which we practiced. In 1942, when Gandhiji gave the call for Quit India, along with that call, he promised to the people of India who would be an Indian citizen. And he laid it down in unambiguous terms. I'll just lost the... He said, Hindustan belongs to all those who are born and bred here and who have no other country to look to. And then he mentioned all the religions that he could possibly think of. Not just the Muslims, not just the Hindus, not just the Christians, Ben Israelis, Jews, every small sect that you could think of, he lists so that nobody gets left out. And then he says, free India will be no Hindu Raj. It will be Indian Raj, based not on the majority of any religious sect or community, but on the representatives of all the people without distinction of religion. The idea that we are being sold today, that citizenship can be something that the people of India have to prove, is something so absurd when you think of the freedom struggle. I do not recall at any time any leader, big or small, ever even raising the issue of citizenship. Yes, it is an issue that came up after partition, and then it was solved in the broadest possible manner. I want to say unequivocally here that when we are told that we are now completing the unfinished business of partition, there can be no bigger lie. The business of partition was finished very efficiently, very humanely, in fact, in a manner that has probably not been done in any other part of the world. The refugee settlement program of the government of India was remarkable in its scope, in its width, and the rapidity with which it actually functioned. Little has been actually written on it, but there is some good work which tells us, Faridabad, so many townships came up to house the people. So, and any conception of that having laws where people who were persecuted in parts of India that had been divided from India, that there was no place. It was no question. The laws were there. They functioned, and people came back and forth happily for years on end. We know that. People went off to Pakistan, they came back. People from Bangladesh came, went back. So this thing that we are now being told, that is an unfinished business of Pakistan, of partition that we are now sorting out, is something that I think we need to question. And for that, I think we need, for the development of this vision for the future, it is very necessary, just as you said, to base ourselves on our civilizational vision. but I think that civilizational vision got embodied and got expressed in our freedom struggle. And it is through that, I think, that in the next stage now, when we are fighting a battle for survival, in a sense, as a civilization, as a nation, as a people, it's that vision that we think will take us forward, and that's the spirit with which these volumes have been conceived of. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Mridula Mukherjee. Pushpraj, we'll have you now on the stage. I'd like to thank the panelists very much for the conversation about the book.
The Rethinking India series in these truly unprecedented times. May I now request Dr. Shashi Tharoor, the former Minister of State for External Affairs and Yechuri, and also a contributor to the first volume, to give us the benefit of his insights. Sir.
Honourable former Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh, Honourable former Vice President Shri Hamid Ansari, Mr. Chidambaram, Mr. Yechuri, my good friends Professor Nandi and Professor Rathore, and of course Acharya from Penguin, ladies and gentlemen, friends. It's an extremely important initiative.